I just need to become a superstar of external development.
Coordinating sounds easy internally, but externally it's tough. That's what I've learned on Amazon.
What would make external development successful?
Ask the other side, am I meeting your mark? Am I meeting your mark?
How do you find your talent?
Hey, I know this, and this. So you can source your talent fast.
I have a lot of work and I have very little time. Help me.
You have done an excellent job. By doing more, sometimes you're actually doing worse.
Hi everyone, my name is Ninel Anderson. I'm CEO of Devoted Studios and I'm your host at Devoted Speakeasy. Today we have an amazing guest, Tuan Ngo. Hi Tuan.
Hey, Ninel, how's it going?
Amazing. Well, I'm going to learn so much from you today. If you guys have not met Tuan before, Tuan has an extensive background in game development, from working for Kojima, Konami, Blind Squirrel, Amazon, and now working as an outsource lead for That No Moon. So Tuan has an extensive background in external development, and that's going to be the topic that we're going to be chatting about. Tuan, are you ready?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the introduction, Ninel, and it's great to see you again. And very happy to be in this podcast.
Why do you think, Tuan, people are afraid of external development? Do you know the myth around it? And what would make external development successful as a thing and not a painful process?
First of all, there's a lot of logistic that's needed, right? You need the right people in place. You need a team that can, have experience. If you were about to do this on your own, yes, it can be completely daunting, right? Like, who do I reach out for? Which vendors do I meet? How about my legal? Do I have a team that can support it? Do I know my pipeline? Blah, blah, blah. Internally, we can answer that quite easy, right? But then how do we get started? How do we get started, right? And then there's another one that's an old myth, right? Like, oh yeah, now like we working with an external partner, we don't have much work for our own artists, right? That's not true. Our artists are still our artists internally. They have, what they can build what their needs now, but they have a whole team to back them up. So some of the myths are there, but yes, the onboarding is can be challenging, of course, right? But with the right people in place and like the infrastructure, it could be a little, the onboarding won't be as scary.
Can you walk me through what does the partner or the client need to have set up on their end before they jump into external development?
Let's backtrack. Like, how do we begin? First is infrastructure, right? First of all, I'm kind of thinking right now, like, how would I start it, and where are some certain successful ones and certain not successful ones? Not successful ones are you throw a couple people and you think like, hey, you're treating this as an internal team, correct? This is not the way to go. You need to have, your communication lines open first. How do you want to communicate? Email, Slack, that's, and then maybe Teams. So, okay, you have that. You need to get a producer, right? Like, I mean, you can work, I mean, a producer is definitely affected. You have to have a person. If you don't have an outsource manager, that someone that has experience. Without experience, it could be very rough. You just like you think you're treating them like once again like an internal artist, but it's different. Even though we're in the same timeline, we have to coordinate. And coordinating sounds easy internally, but externally it's tough. And there's many more ways to go, but that's like the first part.
Okay, so I need to have a coordinator or producer that would build the timeline, the asset backlog, what goes when do we need it. So I need to have a backlog of assets. I need to have a timeline. And what do I do from there?
All right. So now, right, you would need an outsource manager, outsource lead, someone that has experience. Without that experience, it's just brutal.
God, it's brutal out here.
I need certain system in place. I need documentation. How do I give this work to, to the external side, right? How can I present it effectively where they can understand? And trust me, this part is a you can say is an art in itself, right? Just putting that brief together. Some people can do it great. There's always improvement, but some people can just like here, like I want you to. They only give you very minimal information, and when then on the receiving end, that's where all the chaos is. Is like, how do you even want to begin? And then the other part is okay, now like let's place the bid, right? How do you do the estimates with the the external side? Are you ready for that? Do you have all the legal, all that stuff? I don't deal with that, but I can see where like okay, NDAs, all that has to come in place.
You mentioned one of the things that is, in order to be successful, is the brief, right, for external development. I'm sure in your career you have done so many of them. Can you share with me what are the things that go into creating a successful brief for external development?
Okay, I'll go into the successful part, then I'll go into the not successful part. Then go into two parts. Successful part is, let's say you're building a cell phone, right? You need to know the metrics. Either has concept, then fine. But then, okay, with concept, like you need to know that certain things. Is it animatable? Like, what does it do? That is it light emitting? There's a lot of things that internally on the client side we need, but we think we're treating this like an internal team where we can just tap you on the shoulder. But an external team, you have to put this information out. It's like here's your brief of work, right? Here's your service of work, and the clearer it is, the easier for the other side to understand it, right? If things are not answered in the begin earlier stage, it'll be answered later. So however you want to do it, but effectively doing, you want to have a very clear, clean, brief where someone can be, like I would say like a child can read it. That's the most effective way. Of course, the information is there effectively for an adult, but you can read through it, and the person on the other side will be like, "Oh, I got it," and you can move much quicker like that.
Do you have a special formatting for it? Do you add like a quality target reference, samples for materials, references from the internet, multiple assets? Like, what are the things that make it an effective brief or effective package they would go into external development?
So the brief is all dependent on time, right? Like in as a client side, they'll give us a certain amount of time to create the brief. Sometimes you get squeezed, and then you have to create it faster. Of course, then when you have to create it faster, your brief is not as effective. But given the time to create a nice, very clear brief. Another one is effectively, placing, calling out like the name of the asset. Make it so you're always very direct. And then when you move to the material side, like call out certain things that are important to you. What, like this is metal, this is wood. And that thing that can be done better on my end at certain times because of time frame. You need to be effectively doing. You want to have like it's almost you want to compartment. How I would do is I compartmentalize the geo part, and then I compartmentalize the material part. So once the other side gets it, they're like, okay, but if I see people cram everything all at once, and it's not effective.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of people will do their briefs better. And also, I would love to empower the vendors when they receive briefs, also being like, hey, here's our template of briefs. If your brief is missing any of that, that'll be hard for us to absorb. We here at Devoted, we actually recently built a full-on spreadsheet that you can choose, like pick and choose, like how many variations of what you want when it comes to concept stages. Like, you just need to fill in a spreadsheet and add the quality reference thing, and it makes it so easily readable and understandable. If anyone wants to receive a brief template, please hit me up.
I would definitely
um,
hit you up.
Happy to share. From what I've known, working at That No Moon and working in Amazon, you worked with absolutely different cultural background, time zones, countries when it comes to vendors. Do you have any tips, tricks, like any differences that you've noticed working with, vendors in Latin America, vendors in Eastern Europe, and India and Asia?
I think one thing is on the other side is definitely have an English speaker. Well, the producer always English speaking. I always notice that, but the lead, I have worked with teams where the lead is not English speaking, and that could be challenging because now you need a producer to always relay the information, and you already know that information already is already muddied already, right? Because you have to go through another person, and the person is right there. So those are the challenges, right? Going back to cultural difference is time zone could be tough for one thing. Sometimes right now working with the India team, like we I guess because you want to come in early, and but then sometimes you have to accommodate working a little later, to provide that feedback, like at least if you want to meet with the team. As far as art quality, that one is tough to say. I can't really pinpoint which countries are better, right? I have seen some on the Ukraine side that's, on the eastern side is very art is spectacular.
It's fantastic. How do you mitigate the risks with regards to cultural difference and misunderstanding or misinterpretation? Now, working with so many different cultures and countries, what do you have to install on your end as outsourcing lead to make sure that that process is smooth?
Um, Producer is one of them. Like you just have your documentation has to be solid, especially like you want to have an onboarding documentation. I think that's what I've learned on Amazon. I mean, we're always learning, right? Like right here we have great documentation, and that's the first line of defense. On the client side, I think that the beginning is always it's either good or either great or bad. That's where you learn the most, right? And that's where you're like, oh, can I work with this partner? And then as you go, you can understand them. But then the first round isn't always is like people show their best, right? And then as later on throughout the partnership, you can see like, okay, where maybe you put your best out, and the external side. This is on the external side too, where they have other clients, right? And then you have to meet other needs, and you can't have your own needs too. So there is a challenge in there. Hopefully, I'm not like rambling where I'm circling everywhere.
No, as somebody on the vendor side, I always feel like I don't even have my needs. Like my needs come last. Everybody else's needs come first. And then you're like, wait, but what do I need to be successful? I get it what everybody else needs to be successful. And yeah, no, it's you touched a deep part of my soul right here. When you were at that new moon and you were doing a vendor test, right? What are the things that you are taking into consideration? What people should be taking in consideration? What people should be forgiving and knowing that that's their job as a client also to support a vendor onto getting to know and learn and have a learning curve.
When you do a test, let's say if we received a test, and like here's an asset, we send it over to the external partner, and we get it back. If I'm assuming, like not I'm gonna assume we do create a brief for the test also, right? So everything has a brief. It's not like we blindly send out like just something arbitrarily. We probably, like the client will create a brief saying here, like depends if it's stylized, like a sci-fi, realistic, either to World of Warcraft or anything. So we send a brief out, then so we get it back. Then we probably provide an example asset because like we have to come with an example, like some source of like where the external partner can refer to. So it's like, okay, we provide this. I'm gonna assume we're gonna go through each and every single stage. So we're gonna go from low poly. So we evaluate. Okay, like how did the vendor or external partner, like how did they do their low poly, right? How is and low poly is probably the most easiest phase, but sometimes it's like like are the files clean? That's very effective. Are the naming conventions there, right? Because like now, like do they you know are they following directions on, because that's like the early part, and then we once the more critical part is when we hit the high poly, because that's where really the meat and potatoes of the model becomes, that's where you build the high res, right? That's where you bake out from, or that will be near what you see at the final part of the game. So is it hitting our mark? Is it looking like the concept we provided or the reference we're providing? If it's stylized or is hitting certain marks, do we need? Is it look stylized enough? Is there any treatments? that it infuse our our game in there, right? Depending on certain clients, some of them can be you can use as many tries as you want, but let's say you do have guidelines. Are they meeting these certain guidelines? Or are they using, are they optimizing it effectively? Or optimizing their UVs? Are they thinking about? So this is like being very critical. Some those are certain guidelines you will have documentation for, but if you're testing blindly, those are the things that an internal artist look for. And then when you move to the texture phase, that's a completely totally different too. It's every single phase is very different. And then you're like, oh, how are they utilizing the materials? Do they understand PBR? Do they understand, how to create, like different ID, values or definition? So all that comes into play. And and more effectively the vendor on the client the external side can do it, the more confidence the client side feels.
Do you have any practices, good practices, anything that could allow to streamline the time? Like anything that you felt has worked for you to like, because I am behind. I already need to start work in 30 days. How do I do that?
Then you do it on a smaller scale. Like you do a snippet of the work if you want to speed certain things up, because you have to. I've been in a situation where like, and some you have to just I think on the client side and on the vendor you have to know we just have to accept certain things that would not would be how you would properly have it, right? Because if time is short, the information is condensed. You cannot get the proper information over to both sides, and you have to understand, okay, fine, because of short time there's certain things I have to let go, right? And then on the vendor side, like, I know you want to do your best, but within this short period of time there's only so much you can do. So on the other side, ask a lot of questions, try to hit that quality mark as fast as you can, fail fast, right? Both sides need to fail fast. And I think that's something I've learned through on Amazon project, is like there is a very tight deadline, but some things you have to let go, and at the end, like certain, like expectations won't be met.
I have a lot of work that I need to do and I have very little time. Help me.
So on that side, you already probably have certain pipelines together already, like things you learned from the past. How do you streamline information? Your team probably has known like certain templates already, right? So you can kind of, not all templates will work, but you can copy paste here and there.
Okay. Well, let's say I have more money to throw at it. How do I find people that are available? How do you find your talent?
First of all, I would say, like people that you work with before, right? Your network is a big help. People that you work in the studio. For me, you have more experience. You have a Rolodex of people that you have like this black book of people you work with. Like, hey, I know this, and this, right? So you can source your talent fast. And then the larger your network, you can reach out faster to individual freelancers. But if your network is small or you never tapped into it, then it's going to be much more difficult. Like, when I started, I didn't understand, how to reach out to someone so fast, right? Because when you first start, like this world is brand new to you. Like, like I don't. It's like searching for a car. Do I go to the down the street? Do I go to CarMax? But as you get more experience, like I know this person, that person, that person, then it moves much quicker.
So, you've been in the industry for a very long time. Can you share any things that worked for you that you would want other studios to deploy as well that will make them successful?
The communication side is important, right? Like, have. And I know, like, we want to streamline that as much as possible. We want to, like, throw the toss, like just messages back and forth. Teams need to meet each other, and on the client side, like, to have their information ready for the partner to work. To be honest, like, you don't need to do more work than you need. You just need to fulfill the expectations. And I can be completely wrong, but I do feel that if you meet your guidelines, you meet if you meet everything that the client side needs, right? You don't need to do any more. You have met you have done an excellent job. But by doing more, sometimes you're actually doing worse. So if you have done that, the client will come back. This person is reliable. This person is consistent. They meet my mark, and I can give them more work. But now, if you're trying to chase every single corner, you're trying to spread yourself too thin. So you're very focused, right? So I remember working on that, where like this client is like, they would ask, and I was like, and I would be upfront. I was like, I can't make it. I'd be honest too. If I do 12 hours of overtime tonight with my team, can I meet the deadline tomorrow? Um, if I can say yes, then I say that I'll pull my team with me. Let's power through it, right? Let's do a little bit. But if it's impossible mission, I went to the producer. I was like, no, like this is unachievable. You even if I spend 30 hours, so ask for the expectation. So that's one thing. That's something I learned. Like just and don't. And I think the more you try to shy away from it, then it comes back because you're trying to be like a hero, right? You're like, oh, I'm gonna try to do this, and but at the end you're like you're in over your head, and I think that can be for both sides too. So I think that helped, um, where where you're asking the other side like, hey, this is, am I meeting your mark? Am I meeting your mark? I'm meeting your mark. I'm meeting your mark. Like every single corner you're saying that and you're meeting that, then the work will always come because, hey, both sides, you deliver on time, you deliver what is needed. What more can be asked for? Then if you want to improve, then you're like, okay, after, where can I work with your team to improve on now, right? Because this guy, you're a superstar.
I just need to become a superstar of external development.
You're a superstar.
You've been in external development for quite a long time. With the evolvement of the industry, what are the things that you feel over the last, 2, 3 years that have been added on your end to the pipeline to streamline external development that you feel like other studios should deploy as well?
Over the years, we have more software now, right? We have Slack as one communication. That's a communication software. That, and I think now we have like Miro, Bluescape. How to like collaborate. I think that's something when I was at Amazon we didn't use and it was pitched on, but using it here is so effective. And at Amazon, like our feedback was just based through notes. So it was on a call, and it's not, like it's hard to, it's not not saying it's hard, but then you can collaborate, in real time. It's just as I was there because we're drawing something. People are very visual, right? You can point to something. I mean, I can do this on a call, but then the other person can draw back too. So it's a very collaborative, like way to work. There are sticky notes, so that's one communication tool, or like like a type of tool that I've used here at That's No Moon. I think that's a great tool. As far as landscape, how things change, definitely like outsource has become a lot larger. Every single year it has become larger and larger, and as expected too. Because before, like like a game studio was able to ship a game by themselves. As the games gets larger, there's it's expanding now, and it's probably started. I think it even started as getting creating levels together. Now we're like, we want to outsource, like we want to service so many stuff. We want to service levels, we want to service, send out like models, pipelines. So the external partner is very, like very critical to the role for every like for the triple, for any studio, I would say.
I'm sure you have a lot of experiences, good and bad. How would you define a successful partnership or the ideal partnership now that you had all the different ones?
I guess that's a great question. Successful partnership, right? You trust the client, and like we're not gonna like kind of squeeze. And then on the other side is where you meet the expectation. That's where you can build trust, and where deadlines um, are met. That's from the client side, right? That's how do you build trust. Like, and that's a way of getting to a successful partnership. And where there's a lot of, the communication is there. That's another one where the leads, where both sides, the leads does talk to one another and try to like, it's like working together overall in general, right? And one, both sides have to have certain things met, like the client side is always like, you met my needs, you met my needs, right? But on the other side too, like, does it work for you to work with us? Of course, like external, like you want to get the business, sure, right? But then maybe this is a toxic relationship. Yeah, right. The client says, I want is me, 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 and after a while it gets very exhaustive. But in the beginning, sure, you want, that's where you're gonna, sometimes you may have to take on certain jobs where you just build up your portfolio. But let's say going back to a successful partnership is accountability, where just communication is, yeah, it always goes back to communication. Communicative, each side setting expectations, meeting both sides meeting their expectations, and there's a dialogue. And I can see, I see teams where there's no communication, it still works too, and it's really cool to see that, right? And it might be an effective working relationship, and it's quite invisible. But I think um I like the I'm more of a people person. I like to connect, right? And I think the other one is like, like accommodations, right? When I think I worked with one external partner where they accommodated, it feels very human, but you drawn to that, right? Yeah, and then you're like, okay, but then once you get through it all, that, like, like you can say like the honeymoon stage, that's where the meet where things come. And like, how did this how for the client, how did this external partner work with me and then help me resolve that? How do like, and if they can overcome that, right? And then it's always about needs, right? But then of course on the clients that you have to reflect too, was it all them or was it all me? And it's always you're refining that process. And I think over the refinement.
If I could ask the universe about something, I would probably ask all the partners to be empowering of the vendors that they work with in order to feel safe to actually bring up the issues that they're having, because a lot of times the vendors are like, I don't feel safe to share that the directions that I've been receiving are confusing.
You don't feel that?
I'm not saying that I don't feel that. I'm saying that I've seen a lot of different scenarios in the industry, and there's different partnerships, and I've seen a lot, especially like when it comes to individual talent. Like when you are working within a studio, right? It's a you already have a producer that is more diplomatic. You have an art lead; they have the management experience. But when you are a solo artist, especially, it also comes to smaller studios or younger studios as well. You feel like, oh, if I bring up the issue that I'm having, I'm going to lose this project. But it's on both sides. It's, we need to empower people that we work with in making sure that they feel safe about bringing up the issues and uh, confront what doesn't work for them. It doesn't have to be an aggressive confrontation, but it needs to have a place, and the other party needs to be open to listen as well, because it's, collaboration is pretty much like marriage, right? And it's a two-way thing. It's an exchange of energy. Tuan, thank you so much. I feel like I've learned so much from your wisdom, from your experience. I can't wait to get to see more what that no moon is building, and how external development have been supporting your guys' pipeline and building an awesome game. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Ninel. Yeah, once again, thank you for having me on the podcast. It was super fun. Overall, super appreciate you, giving me the time, having the space that we can talk about this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, maybe we're gonna have a follow-up. Maybe we're gonna have a round table. See what the reaction of the audience gonna be. Thank you, Tuan, so much.